As always, hold up, sisters and brothers of the sun, moon, and stars, sons and daughters of royalty, divine sparks of divinity, Aboriginal, Alkebulan, African mothers and fathers of humanity, human civilizations and culture. Please wait, a cotton picking, down home, dirty rice, Delta Mississippi blues, fried chicken, baked chicken, smothered chicken, collard greens, cabbage green, cornbread, black eyed peas, pinto beans, sweet potato pie, mom's apple pie, juke joint, Mississippi moonshine minute. Now that's a minute. A Mississippi moonshine minute. But anyway, once again, I'm 8 GMTN, Mwanga Sadaka Muntu, Nimsayu Waset, Anafiel, the Oracle, and I, along with Brother Willie Mike Check Colbert, Executive Director of MC Productions, thank you very much for wisely interconnecting, ingathering, and ingesting the red pill of accurate historical knowledge and truth, accurate historical spiritual knowledge and truth, highly and heavily seasoned and spiced with unconditional love, so as to psychotherapeutically experience and bear witness to another awesome and amazing, mind-shaking, soul-shaking, spirit-stirring episode of Purge, Purify, and Renew Your Mind. Coming to you once again from the backwoods, muddy waters, sugar ditches, mosquito swamps, dirt roads, rattlesnake plantations, railroad tracks, mockingbirds, and magnolia trees of Greenville and Delta, Mississippi. For those of you who may not have yet heard through the cosmic community grapevine, the primary purpose of Purge, Purify, and Renew Your Mind is not only to purge, purify, and renew minds, but to enlighten minds, empower people, enrich, enhance, elevate, and transform as many lives as possible for the better. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a minute, and so this is a fresh episode, and bear with us as we joyfully, excited and delighted take this journey. Our topic for today, or topic for discussion, is education, miseducation, and re-education. Now bear witness and be mindful of the fact that this is a broad and expansive topic. Anytime you mention or saying you're dealing with authentic education, you're talking about a life process itself. So what we endeavor to do on this episode is just to give a sketch, right, or outline or overarching view of education, miseducation, and re-education. It's a powerful topic. It's a powerful theme. So I call on the ancestors to guide us in this process. I call on the ancestors, and we know that we are our ancestors. So no doubt about that. So we call on this divine power and energy in us to bring forth the knowledge and information that need to be disseminated on this particular episode. So moving right along, the word education is derived from two Latin root words, right? And when we look at the origin of words, that's called the science of etymology. And we know that etymology and that words have a history just like anything else in life. Everything has a history. There's nothing that exists that does not have what we call history. And when I say history and using that in quotation marks, I'm not talking about history. Matter of fact, when I use the word history, I'm using it in the sense of what I call life studies. And I know that when we're speaking specifically to ourselves about information, accurate information, knowledge, and truth that deal with us, or that's relevant to us as a people, we like to use today our story, right, as opposed to his story. So I'm talking about today the broad, expansive definition of the word history, which I call life studies. And then technically, the word history doesn't mean his story. You know, we play on words and put a dash in between the two words, his and stir, and we say his stir. That's good and fine, and that's usable. But the etymological meaning and origin of the word history itself simply means to examine, to look back into a thing, to thoroughly investigate, to research, right? Because you're looking for knowledge and truth. You're looking for exact science. So when I use the word history, I'm not, once again, not talking about history. But anyway, there are two Latin root words of the word education. The first word is educare, and over the past years, I've seen it in writings, and great speakers use the word educare to mean what the second root word truly means. Educare, according to a researcher by the name of Kraft in 1984, in his research, he revealed that the word educare, right, really means to train and mold. M-O-L-D, train and mold. That's not the one we want, the root word we want to use today for this broader, expansive, authentic meaning of education. Educere, E-D-U-C-E-R-E. That's the one that we want to use, which means to draw out, to raise up, to nourish, and to cultivate and bring forth and bring out the hidden gifts and talents that are within an individual. So educere, not educare, that once had been used and still is used to suggest and mean to bring out, to cultivate. But educere, E-D-U-C-E-R-E, according to this researcher by the last name of Kraft in 1984, revealed that educare, just reiterating, educare means to train and mold, and educere means to cultivate, to recognize, to identify the hidden gifts and talents within an individual, and then to help that individual as an so-called educator to cultivate, right, to lead out, to bring forth all of the wonderful God-given, quote-unquote, God-given talents and gifts and ability. So that's what we want to work with. And as a starter and as a primary resource, and even though I have many resources around me here at this time, which is not all that can be brought forth, I want to use our elder scholar and psychologist, Dr. Naeem Akbar. And this particular booklet is entitled From Miseducation to Education. And this booklet is still in print. And it's only 26 pages long. But this booklet is chock full of relevant knowledge and information that's usable in a practical sense right now for us. Right now. But Dr. Naeem Akbar says on page 3 of his booklet, and I'm quoting, So don't run away because I make quotes and read passages. I'm bringing forth the scholarship, the books, the information, the resource that anyone could should be inspired to go check out for themselves, to support and substantiate the points that I'm making. So bear witness and experience what's being said and be inspired. Give me your listening ear. Dr. Akbar says, education involves being able to bring out of us a greater expression of that which is already in us. Moving in accord with our predetermined nature is the nature of education. So education and schooling is not the same. That should trigger your thought. What we call true, authentic education is not schooling. And matter of fact, schooling is more closer to being trained, right, than education. And I've made some posts on Facebook, distinguishing from my perspective and in my opinion, based on my research and understanding, that education and training are not synonymous, but training is an aspect or component of education. But training and education are not the same. Understand that. Moreover, Dr. Akbar says, education is a process by which you are more actively capable of manifesting who and what you are. Think over that. Think over that. And on page 2, I'm using this as a primary source, although I will be quoting and making reference to other sources. Dr. Akbar says on page 2 of this 26-page powerful and relevant pamphlet, miseducation results from being trained rather than educated. What is training? He asked the question. Every kind of life, every kind of organism, every kind of process in creation has a natural path to express itself. Even our own physical life begins to grow in the womb, following a systematic process long before we ever come into consciousness. Think over that. A precise pattern, right? Long before we come into consciousness. He goes on. Even the sperm out of which we were fertilized followed a clearly precise course. Even the sperm, right, that connected with the egg or the ovum in our mother's womb that became you and I, followed a precise pattern. Wow. A precise course, traveling up the fallopian tube, and only one out of trillions of billion sperms connected with the egg in our mother's womb that became you and I. So in fact, and in truth, you and I right now today, we are successful. Success is built into our spiritual, biological, genetic makeup. We are already a success, the greatest success. When that one sperm following a precise course or pattern, traveling up with knowledge in his head and connected with the egg or ovum in our mother's womb that became you and I. Think over that. Think over that. Wow. He says, repeating, even the sperm out of which we were fertilized followed a clearly precise course, moving to its mark, hitting its mark, and growing systematically in accord with a pattern that had been genetically determined thousands of years before that particular cell ever came into existence. Wow. Think over that. Moving right along. So we do not live in a universe of what they call serendipity, which means to do as you want to do, if you decide to do it. You know, we don't live in a world. It's not following universal laws to just say, oh, do your, you know, you hear brothers and sisters, oh man, just do your thing and I'll do mine. You know, like we don't live, move, and experience our beingness in a universe or in a natural laws and principles and so forth and so on. Think over that. Think over the words. Think over the ideas and concepts that I'm trying to bring forth to establish a point, a truthful point, a respectful point. We live in a universe of tremendous order and orderlessness. When I read that sentence, or first read that sentence, I thought about Ma'at. You know, the winged bird, the feather of truth, and the words and concepts and ideas that are associated with Ma'at. Truth, justice, righteousness, order, balance, harmony, and reciprocity. Think over that. And he said, we live in a universe of tremendous order and orderlessness. That's Ma'at. That's Ma'at. That's the social order and the cosmic order of the ancient African Egyptian, the Kemetans, right? The Africans of Northeast Africa. Moreover, Dr. Akbar says, everything has a pattern to follow in this universe. We find that we do the things that we are supposed to do. As we do the things that we are supposed to do, that there is a process whereby we can become educated. Education, listen to this. Education involves being able, as I stated in the beginning, to bring out of us a greater expression of that which is already inside of us. Moving in accord with our predetermined nature is the nature of education. Wow. Wow. Think over that. Meditate on that. And brothers and sisters, bear with me as I be quick, but don't hurry. As I settle down and be quick, but don't hurry. He gives an example, or a few examples, to distinguish between true education, or as I say, authentic education, excuse me, pardon me, and training. It reads, the dog that learns how to bury bones and to hunt more effectively for meat to feed himself and his family, that dog is educated. That's an educated dog, or operating with, as I say, with instinctive, inner knowing, inner wisdom, intuitive wisdom. He says when that dog learns how to stand on its two hind legs and wear a dress and dance to music, that dog is simply trained. He is miseducated. He is cute, and you will pay money to see him or her do it, but he or she is not an educated dog. He or she is a trained dog. When a seal will jump into the water and bring up a fish to feed itself and to feed its young, that seal is educated. But when that seal is required to stand on its hind legs, to balance balls on his or her nose, and to clap his or her fins, then jump into the water to jump up or jump through to get a fish that you have provided, that is a trained seal and not an educated seal. The lion that will jump through a fiery hoop because on the other side you have provided a big fat steak for him or her, that's a trained lion and not an educated lion. So realize that true, authentic education is not synonymous with schooling or training. Big difference. That's a big difference. So moving right along, sisters and brothers, it brings to my attention, and I think about education when I say get into education and try to or endeavor to elaborate on it. When we look and do research and realize, as I said in my opening, that Aboriginal, Alkebulan, African mothers and fathers, we are mothers and fathers of humanity, human civilizations with an S on it, and culture. So we are the mothers and fathers not only of humanity, but human civilizations and culture. What do that mean? That means that we brought forth the elements of civilization. Matter of fact, first of all, we populated. Science tells us this. And physicists, you know, when they did that I think in 1980 something in Time magazine, where they reported that a physicist, you know, they did experiments by taking the mitochondrial gene out of various women's on the planet, and that only women's have, and they traced the origin of humanity back to eastern Africa. And so they stated what many historians and scientists had stated before, that humanity had its origin on the continent of Africa, and those Africans we call Africans or Alkebulan or Aboriginal people, regardless of what name we use, we should know who we're talking about and not get into a verbal or mental battle, fist fight over the names and labels. Just know that the people that are being referred to, you and I. Okay? So those original mothers and fathers populated all the other continents. The foundation people on the planet, on all the continents, is Aboriginal or Alkebulan or African people, Moors, whatever name you want to call it. It doesn't make a difference at this time. So those people, our parents, who we are the sons and daughters of, they brought forth civilization and established culture. And so, excuse me, and some of the elements or main ingredients of civilization, we brought forth science, we brought forth mathematics, we brought forth astrology, we brought forth astronomy, architecture, music, geometry, trigonometry, farming and the rotation of crops, painting, medicine, family life, social organization, political organization, economic organization, and so forth and so on. So we the parent stock or the mothers and fathers of human civilizations. And this human civilization, or as Dr. Chancellor Williams says, it was one African culture, Alkebulan Aboriginal culture, that expressed itself among various groups of our people, but it still stemmed from or was derived from these civilizations, this one culture that had similar base fundamental rootedness, that were the same wherever Aboriginal, Alkebulan, African people found themselves on the planet. Think over that. Think over that. And I'm reminded Dr. Khalid Muhammad, all praise to him. You know, he used to say in many of his lectures that, and I'm paraphrasing his statement. He said, Africa, the continent called Africa today, is our throne. The world, or the earth, is our home, but the continent presently called Africa is and was our throne. Think over that. Think over that. But look at this. Think of this. Being quick but not hurried. Here's another book, and just to substantiate a few of the points I just stated. History of the African Olmecs, so-called black civilizations of America, from prehistoric times to the present era, by Paul Alfred Barton, Barton. Get this book, another important book to have in your personal library, and we all should have and be establishing and building a personal self-library. Every home should have one. Every so-called church should have a library. Or every so-called social organization among us should have a library of great, relevant, and significant books. That's a story for another time. But on page 13 of this great book, under the subtitle, and ask the question, were blacks in the Americas before the Mongolian or Mongoloid invasion? And he writes, the above question has already been answered. Blacks were in the Americas before the quote-unquote evolution of the Mongoloid type, from the original Homo sapien Africoid type who entered Asia over 100,000 years ago. Blacks were in the Americas when no other quote-unquote racial group existed. I'm going to read that again. Blacks, Aboriginal people, Alkebulan, so-called African people were in the Americas when no other quote-unquote racial group existed. And these blacks, according to solid evidence, were in the Americas as early as 70,000 years before the present. 70,000 years before the present. Africans in the Americas were here. And if you doubt that, read this book. By the first American title, the first Americans were Africans, revisited, by Dr. David Imhotep, PhD. Get this book. And both of these books are dealing with archaeological evidence, facts, information, pottery, you name it. So it's not just the position or the premise that they take with the writing of their book is not just based on hearsay. It's not just a belief. They have done the research. They have gathered the research. They have examined the evidence. The first Africans, the first Americans were Africans, Aboriginal, Alkebulan, African people. Check the books out. Get the books. Read them. Discuss it. Break it down. Analyze it. But with that being said, I'm thinking of and relating all of what I said to Dr. George G.M. James' book, Stolen Legacy, and I have it before me, where he talks about that there's no such thing as Greek philosophy. It's ancient African Kemetic philosophy, knowledge, culture. And what I'm saying, that we had education. The greatness that we performed in the so-called past was a result of us being an educated people. And I'm saying that what gave us Aboriginal, Alkebulan, African people, the ability, the extraordinary, mind-blowing ability to produce great civilizations and culture all over the planet and on the continent itself, was what I call authentic education. We were an educated people. We were not a trained people, even though, as I said, I'm repeating myself, that training is an aspect or component of authentic education, but it's not education. We had authentic education, and that authentic education gave us the powerful, extraordinary ability to create wonders on the planet Earth, all over the continent of Africa itself, not just ancient Egypt or Kemet, but later in Ghana, Songhai, Mali, Monomatapo in South Africa, Nubia, Kush in the Sudan, Carthage, in northern part of Africa. I mean, we can go on and on with various civilization and culture that had writings. We were a literate people. That was education. And that was our greatness. And we were successful people. And we laid the foundation of what we call civilization and culture that for today. But my point, once again, it was a result of being educated as a people. Dr. James, I'm going to read again. I hope you don't mind me reading some excerpts out of various books and bringing forth the scholarship in the books so that you can do your own homework. So you don't have to just believe me, but you can sit and get these books, check the sources, sit in quiet meditation and reflection, which you should do, and examine the evidence, the information, and draw your own conclusion. And I would venture to say that your conclusion of most of you would be similar and will be similar to what I'm stating verbally, trying to express to you, if you be honest and open with yourself and not afraid of your social engineering, your programming, your miseducation. It's time to break the mental, psychological, intellectual shackles and be educated or re-educated all over again. But once again, that's a part of this sketch that I'm trying to do. And hopefully, maybe I would get through it. But this is just an overview. And we're going to continue this dialogue or the point with this subject that I said that We had education, and this education gave us the mental and spiritual and physical power and ability to perform greatness. Then something happened. We'll get into the details of that, but something happened. We went into a cave, or a hole, pushed or fell, or a combination of the two, into a dark hole of miseducation. And we are still in that hole or trap of miseducation. And in this age of Aquarius, the water barrier, and my spiritual twin brother, Dr. Khalif, did a video, I think it was early this morning. He was elaborating on and breaking down the esoteric meaning of that particular biblical verse in the Bible where it talks about the water barrier, and how we have entered into the age of Aquarius, 2,160 years. And we have left the so-called Piscean age, the age of duality, right? The age of hypocrisy, the age of lies, false ideas, beliefs, and concepts. That age is over. And as I like to say, that it's over, but the effects and the effects of it still lingers on. It's on its deathbed, even though we have entered into the Aquarian age, the age of what the Dr. Khalif pointed out over and over again, and Brother Will Rogers and Lakeisha Williams and a lot of other my friends on personal on Facebook, Brother Michael Bernard. I mean, I can go on and on, but they continue to drive home and reiterate that this new age of Aquarius is the age of the increase of knowledge, an age of unity, consciousness, and awareness, an age of spiritual growth and development, an age of prosperity and greater prosperity and wealth for all, particularly the masses of people, and particularly for the so-called people called black people, Aboriginal, Alkebulan, African people. Because more than any other people, regardless of what we like to say or acknowledge, we have been hit in the head more deeper than any other people in the annals of history. Think over that. All people, quote unquote, are waking up in various degrees, and will wake up in this incarnation or the next one or another, because we on the cutting edge of the golden and glorious age of Aquarius, which is 2,160 years. On page 27 of Dr. George G.M. James' powerful book, classic book, Stolen Legacy, that was written, I think, first printed in 1954. And soon thereafter, Dr. George G.M. James was found, it was found that he had been murdered. And most people, most researchers say, for the information that he revealed in this book. But moreover, he says on page 27, and bear with me as I read again, Plotinus defines this experience, this godlike experience, as the liberation of the mind from its finite consciousness, when it becomes one and is identified with the infinite. This liberation was not only freedom of the soul from the bodily impediments, but also from the will of reincarnation or rebirth. It involved a process of disciplines or purification of the body and the soul. Think over that. Purification of the body and the soul. And I may not be able to read excerpts from Dr. What's his name? Hold on for a minute. The book African Origins of Psychological Psychiatry by Dr. Richard King. He gets it more in depth on this purification process of body and soul. And matter of fact, many of you probably have read and are familiar with the verse. I think it's in the book of Psalms. I think it's the 51st chapter, maybe the 10th verse, but you can verify where it said, create in me, O God, a clean heart. It's talking about the purification of the soul. That's just another connection. But moving right along, since the mystery system, and the mystery system is what the Greeks call, because it was a mystery to them, but this mystery system was the high educational, spiritual, cultural, educational system of the ancient Kemetans. Think over that. The Egyptian system, like the modern university, was the center of organized culture, and candidates or students entered it as the leading source of ancient culture. The Egyptian mystery system or high educational system had 3 degrees or 3 grades of students, as Dr. James states. Pardon me for coughing. This little coughing, kind of frequent, and I'm dealing with it. But the Egyptian mystery system had 3 grades of students. The mortals, as he called it, they were the probationary students, or students who were being instructed, but who had not yet experienced what Dr. Richard King calls the inner vision. 2, the second grade of student was the intelligences. These were the students who had attained the inner vision and had received mind or nous, N-O-U-S, or mind. The 3rd grade, the creators or sons and daughters of light, who had become identified or united with the light. And that was considered to be true spiritual consciousness or awakening or awareness. Think over that. This is part of education. And Dr. James goes on page 28. For years, these students or candidates underwent disciplinary intellectual exercise and bodily asceticism with intervals of tests and ordeals to determine their fitness to proceed to more serious, solemn, and awful process of actual initiation. Their education consisted not only in the cultivation of the 10 virtues, which were made a condition to eternal happiness, but also of the seven liberal arts, which were intended to liberate the soul. We're dealing with education now. We're not dealing with training. We're dealing with education. There was also admission to greater mysteries, which were in esoteric philosophy was taught to those who had demonstrated proficiency. Grammar, or rhetoric, and logic were disciplines of moral nature by means of which the irrational tendencies of a human being were purged away, and he or she was trained to become a living witness to the divine logos. geometry, and arithmetic were sciences of transcendental space and numeration, the comprehension of which provided the key not only to the problems of one's being, but also to those physical ones which are so baffling today, owing to our use of the inductive method. Astronomy dealt with the knowledge and distribution of inner forces in man and woman, and the destiny of individual races and nations. Music or harmony meant the living practice of philosophy, the adjustment of human life in harmony with God, until the personal soul became identified with God, one with God. Think over that. You remember Jacob wrestling with the so-called angel and defeated the angel and, transcended, as we say, the Kundalini energy was raised up to the pineal gland. And Jacob, more or less paraphrasing, said that his life has been preserved because now he is one with God. So as Dr. John Henry Clark, as I said, and as my spiritual twin brother, Dr. Khalid, also said, don't throw away your Bible. We must learn how to read it and interpret it esoterically, metaphysically. Because the truth is there. And the Bible is just a reflection of the body temple. The body temple is the Bible. In the Bible that we read, the so-called King James Version that many of us have fell in love with, esoterically deciphered, is talking about the processes in our bodies, the chemical, biological, electric functions and operations within our bodies and in our minds, our brains, that are in direct correspondence with the cosmos. Don't you remember in the Kabbalion, the second principle, as above, so below, as the inner, so the outer? Don't you remember? That the Great Pyramid in ancient, in Africa, in Egypt, Northeast Africa, Alkebulan, is lined up with Osiris belt, the stars in the heaven, so-called heavens, and is also in alignment with the pineal gland in our brains, the law of correspondence. But anyway, moving right along. Music or harmony meant the living practice of philosophy, the adjustment of the human life into harmony with God, until the personal soul became identified with God, when it would hear and participate in the music of the spheres. Wow. That's what so-called Pythagoras learned in his traveling and acceptance into the higher educational system of the ancient Egyptian or Kemetans. That's where he got his learning. He used the pi to build the pyramids. So it was 1,000 years old before Pythagoras came on the scene. It was therapeutic and was used by the Egyptian priestess in the cure of diseases. Such was the Egyptian theory of salvation, through which the individual was trained or educated to become God-like while on earth, and at the same time qualified for everlasting happiness. This was accomplished through the efforts of the individual. Efforts through the individuals, of the individual. And I'm pausing here because many times, we say, well, God gonna work it out. Or just put it in God's hand. Just let the universal law be whatever it's gonna be. It's all according to plan. It may be so, and ultimately it is. But that don't free us up from our duties and responsibilities. We say, you read in the New Testament where it say faith without works is dead. I used to tell my grandma, or say to my grandmother, when she used to say to me, my maternal grandmother, she said, Michael, just wait on the Lord. And my response would be, Mama, shouldn't we work while we wait? And that's what that was my response. And I tried in my own way at that time, at an early age, to give an example. I said, Mom, I can sit here in this bedroom, and I say my faith can be pure as gold. But if I don't get up and go in the kitchen, if I want biscuits and prepare the ingredients and put it in the oven and watch it, then I won't get no biscuits, because the biscuits are not going to fall out of the sky. Regardless if my faith is pure as gold. And we all have heard, and pardon the way I'm talking here, a little coughing or whatever, my throat is not hurting, but just this little coughing continually as I talk. But we have heard that it said God works through men and women, or God, this force and power that we call God, that's within us, this divine spark, right, helps those who help themselves. So if we don't go get to work, do some work, some positive, progressive work, some constructive work, then God is not working either. He's sitting or being still just like we are. And in the Quran, the holy book of the Muslim, and I'm not saying I'm a Muslim, this is an African crown and the African attire, Alkebulan, so get that out of your mind. Don't let that be a block. But a verse says, Allah, or God, will not help a people if they do not help themselves. And that's not the exact wording of it, but I think it said more close to saying God, I can't get it right, but it's saying that God, or Allah, works through us. Or God, or Allah, help those who help themselves. We must put the left foot forward. We must make the effort and be in line with universal and natural laws. That's the point. That's the point. So don't get all hung up if I mess up the English language, because it's not our mother tongue anyway. But at the same time, there's no excuse for us not to master it. And we are mastering it, and we have mastered it. And we're going to master some other languages. And also we're going to master eventually some lost mother tongues that are still buried deep down in ourselves. And in closing on this passage by Dr. James, he said, this everlasting happiness was accomplished through the efforts of the individual, through the cultivation of the arts and sciences on the one hand, and a life of, ma'atic virtue on the other. There was no mediator between man, woman, and his salvation, as we find in the Christian theology or any other religious theology. Wow. Think over that, brothers and sisters. And the point is, this is education. This is, pardon me, true education, authentic education. And we were an educated people that gave us this power and ability, extraordinary power and ability to create and perform marvelous things on the planet Earth. But something happened. And just making a sketch of what happened, and we're going to probably in our next episode deal with how we fell or were pushed into a dark dungeon, a dark, as it's called, a dark night of the soul, where we lost the knowledge of ourselves, our historical and spiritual identity. And real quickly here, as I round this up, this episode up, I wanted to read something from Dr. Akbar again, but Dr. Akbar in another booklet, he mentions the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And he stated that when the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, what he called, or was using the phrase knowledge of self, that was synonymous with the ancient Kemetans saying man and woman know thyself. That had nothing to do with no Socrates. That it was on the inside and outside of the temples in ancient Kemet. It said, man, woman, know thyself. That's where Socrates got it from. But anyway, Dr. Akbar stated that about the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And here I want to read once again the scholarship to substantiate and validate the points that I'm making. But in the Message to the Black Man, on page Black Man and Woman in the Wilderness of so-called North America, and I say the concrete jungles today of North America. But on page 39, up under the heading, Get Knowledge to Benefit Self, and you'll see the correlation between authentic education and knowledge of self, and the phrase of the ancient Kemetans, man and woman, know yourself, or know thyself. The Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad says, I am for the acquiring of knowledge, or the accumulation of knowledge, as we now call it, education. There it is. First, my people must be taught the knowledge of self. Then and only then will they be able to understand others and that which surrounds them. Anyone who does not have a knowledge of self is considered a victim of either amnesia or unconsciousness and is not very competent. The lack of knowledge of self is a prevailing condition among my people here in America. Gaining the knowledge of self makes us unite in a great unity. Knowledge of self makes you take on the great virtues of learning. Moreover, the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad states, my people should get an education which will benefit their own people, and not an education adding to the quote-unquote storehouse of their teacher. We need education, but an education which moves us from the shackles of slavery and servitude. Wow. Get an education, but not an education which leaves us in an inferior position and without a future. Get an education, but not an education that leaves us looking for the so-called slave master for a job. Education for my people should be where our children are off to themselves for the first 15 or 16 years in classes separated by sex. That's what he said. Then they could and should seek higher education without the danger of losing respect for self or seeking the loss of their identity. No people strive to lose themselves among other people except the so-called American Negroes. This they do because their lack of knowledge of self or lack of authentic, true education. We should acquire an education where our people will become better students than their teachers. Get an education which will make our people produce jobs for self, will make our people willing to be able to go and do for self. Wow. He says, I recall in 1922 or 23, when a debate was taking place in Congress concerning appropriate funds for Howard University, a school set aside to train my people in the nation's capital. A senator said this, and it is in the records to be examined in effect. What would be the need of the government appropriating money to educate Negroes? He said they would not teach our people the science of modern warfare or defense, birth control or chemistry. He knew these were things free people must know in order to protect, preserve, and advance themselves. This shows the slave master has been very successful in dominating us with an education beneficial to him, to other people. That's miseducation to us. There is a saying among us, mother may have, father may have, but God blesses the child who has his own. It's time that we have our own. I want an education for my people that will let them exercise the right of freedom. We are 100 years up from enslavement at that time of his writing. We are constantly told that we are free. Why can't we take advantage of that freedom? I want an education for my people that will elevate them. Why should we always be lying at the gate begging for bread, shelter, clothing, and jobs if we are free and educated? Do not get an education just to set it up as some useless, some symbolic monument to the black man and woman in the Western Hemisphere. We need an education that eliminates divisions among us. Acquire an education that creates unity and makes us desire to be with our own. In closing, he says, the acquiring of knowledge for our children and ourselves must not be limited to the 3 hours, reading, writing, arithmetic. It should instead include the history of the black nation, the knowledge of civilization of man and woman and the universe and all the sciences. It will make us a greater people of tomorrow. We must instill within our people the desire to learn and then use that learning for self. We must be obsessed with gaining knowledge, getting that type of knowledge we may use towards the elevation and benefit of our people. When we have such knowledge among us, we must make it possible for them to acquire this wealth, which will be beneficial and useful to us. Knowledge is the result of learning and is a force or energy that makes its barrier accomplish or overcome obstacles, barriers, and resistance. In fact, God means possessor of power and force. The education my people need is that knowledge, the attributes of God, which creates power to accomplish and make progress in the good things and righteous things of life. Peace out, brothers and sisters, on that quote. And as we close, or as I close, wow. Time does fly. But in closing, brothers and sisters, as I wind down, I'd like to say I appreciate you giving me your attention, and hopefully what I stated from the beginning until now has been educational to you, has inspired you, has informed you to seek re-education and not be in denial that our minds have been twisted, because many of us are in denial. And just like any form of addiction, until that individual acknowledge that they have an addiction, true healing cannot take place. It must be an acknowledgement and acknowledging to the addiction, that's not meaning that that doesn't mean that one is less than, you know. And I made a post earlier to this morning, and there's some thoughts I always had and continue to see. And I said was talking in general, stop blaming other victims for their ignorance, for their brainwashing, right? For their social conditioning and learned helplessness. Because we all, in one way or another, to one degree or another, has been and still are affected and infected. So stop blaming the victim for their own shortcoming. Something has happened, and we should make that our starting point. Realizing the miseducation, realizing the learned helplessness, realizing the brainwashing, realizing the Stockholm syndrome, realizing what produced the cognitive dissonance, and so forth and so on, and realizing what Dr. Barbara E. Wright, who coined the word mental side and wrote about it in his pamphlet, The Psychopathic Racial Dynamic, Racial Personality, and other essays. But he coined the word mental side and defined it as the deliberate and systematic destruction of a person or people's mind for ultimate elimination. Think over that. That's mental side. And Dr. Amos Wilson spoke about social amnesia. Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois called it double consciousness. So brothers and sisters, pardon me for the little cough. We will pick up on our next episode, and we more than likely will reiterate some of what was just stated, and we'll move into what miseducation looked like and what the effects of it and how we reflect it in everyday life, in our personal life, family life, neighborhood life, community life, city life, regional life, national life, international life. We'll talk about that. Miseducation. We'll dive a little more deep into that, and we'll get to make full circle with re-education. What that means, what that consists of, and why. So in closing, once again, I say every shut-eye isn't closed and every goodbye isn't gone. Not to know is bad, but not to want to know is worse. And I say in closing, Amani na upendo, which is peace and love. Until next time, peace out.